There you
Okay, Diane, if you would take over admitting people, that would be great. Welcome, everyone, to the November 2024 North Precinct Advisory Council. I'm Katie Dwyer, the current president. We're really glad you joined us tonight. It feels like we might have a light crowd tonight. I think there's a lot of people sort of just hunkering down for their various reasons. But of course, we are recording this so folks can catch up after. And we may bring Sound Transit back again. I think it's probably something the folks in the North Precinct and the North Seattle area are going to continue to want to know more about. So, at any rate, welcome. And really, I'm just going to go ahead and dive on in and introduce our two speakers for tonight. We have Eric Ashley Vinke, and where did you go? I've lost my other speaker. There you are, Chris Packard. And I am going to spotlight you both. And I am going to make you co-hosts so that you can both share whatever you need to share. So with one more click of the button, there you are. You're both spotlighted. And I will just say welcome. Thank you both very much for coming. We appreciate hearing about Sound Transit, public safety, and security now that we have this wonderful light rail going clear up into Linwood. So with that, I will stop talking. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Well, this is actually going to be the Chris show for the most part tonight, but I'm here. My name is Eric Ashley Vinka. I'm the Government and Community Relations Director for the North Corridor of Sound Transit. So Linwood Link and Everett Link are where I spend all of my time. And so I'll be here on hand to answer questions that come up outside of Chris's world with what he'll be talking to us tonight. But primarily, we'll be hearing from Chris to get an update on what we're doing for security and safety along the corridor, especially now that we've made a huge expansion over the last year. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Chris. Chris, take the floor.
All right, we don't use a lot of Zoom, so I just want to make sure, can you guys see my full screen PowerPoint or am I on my other screen?
You're not on full screen, but we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay, let me try one more thing here. How about now?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you for having me. My name is Chris Packard. I'm a senior security specialist for Sound Transit. Kind of a fancy name for I manage all of our security contractors and our security vendors that we utilize. My team is a group of 4 plus a manager that manages the 4 separate contractors. We also do a lot of special event planning to deal with large crowds. Some that you guys might be very familiar with would be like the UW football games, where we have large crowds coming into UW and we have to manage those lines. So although we contract out a lot of our security, and we'll go into that here a little bit down the road in this PowerPoint presentation, we also do a lot of behind the scenes work with making sure that they're in place for our events and to make sure that transit is as safe as we can make it. So just a little bit about myself. I've been with Sound Transit for going on 2 years now. Prior to that, I was in law enforcement for 15 for the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, where I promoted up to sergeant and did all sorts of different specialty assignments throughout those years, and then ultimately looked for a new second career, I guess you'd say, and ended up here at Sound Transit to try to assist in making Sound Transit as safe as possible as we continue to expand over the 3 counties. So that's a little bit about me. As far as the security is concerned, why am I not? Oh, there we go. Okay. So tonight, I just prepared a brief presentation and then obviously open it up to any questions that you all may have. I'll go over our security overview and kind of what our security footprint looks like. I'll go over our law enforcement overview, some just some really kind of like high level trends. I know that there's a lot of interest in what's occurred since the Linwood link is opened. And I'll be honest, we don't have a lot of that data because we're, about a month, 2 months into it now. We're about 2 weeks behind on our data. So I really only have September data at this point. We'll be getting October's here shortly. And then we'll talk about, I know that some of the questions that came through were about parking garage security, also bus security, and then obviously open it up to any questions and answers. I did make a promise to Katie that if I don't have the answer to any of your questions, myself or Eric will do our best to answer them. And if not, we'll write those questions down and I will get the answers for you and email them over so you guys can distribute them out amongst your group. So I'll start with kind of the backbone of Sound Transit, and that's our, as far as our security operations is concerned, and that's our Security Operations Center. You can think of this as a large dispatch center that monitors a large amount of cameras, that answers text messages into security, phone calls into security, and it's kind of the lifeline between our security officers in the field, our customers that we utilize or that utilize our system, and then they're the bridge between them, LCC, which I'll talk about, which is our Link Control Center just briefly, and also Sound Transit law enforcement and actually local law enforcement in jurisdictions. It's a 24/7 communications center. They monitor approximately 3,184 cameras, obviously not all at one time. But as you can see in the picture, the picture is a little bit outdated. We have a much more sophisticated, we call it a view wall now, but they can have multiple cameras up at one time, depending on where they need to monitor and what they need to look at. We have dispatchers that work out of there and folks that also answer phone calls, like I said, text messages and emails. So the main security operations center is located at Union Station in downtown Seattle. We have a satellite office in Tacoma, and then we have an auxiliary SOC or security operations center that we open up for special events. So an example of that would be the MLB All-Star game that occurred. That's above and beyond what we would normally be doing. So we open that auxiliary SOC to be able to bring in additional dispatchers, additional call takers, etc. I mentioned earlier that it connects ST Link Control Center, so the LCC security and Sound Transit police 24/7. Our Link Control Center is who runs our trains, scheduling, if there's any kind of service disruptions, but they manage the trains and the train schedule on a daily basis. So all of our security related concerns or security issues also have to go through the Link Control Center because they're the ones that ultimately stop our trains if we have an issue and we need to deal with that issue, or there's something that has come up to where a train can't move for a bit for whatever reason. We need to make sure we have a direct line of communication with the Link Control Center. So our SOC and the Link Control Center talk basically nonstop. And that is kind of being the security operations center, the lifeline between the Link Control Center and security operations out in the field. Like I was saying earlier, they live monitor cameras throughout the Sound Transit system, 3,148 and growing on a weekly basis, it seems like, as we continue to grow and get bigger. Our dispatchers currently are all contracted, dispatchers and call takers, but we do have a Sound Transit employee called a Sound Transit superintendent or an SOC superintendent who is staffed in that operations center 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they are, as our folks are contracted, they're supervised by the companies that they work for, but they're kind of the overall supervisor and the manager on duty of the security operations center at the time. Down below, I just have obviously our call and our text number that's plastered everywhere. If you need security or any safety related concerns, you can call or text that phone number. It'll be answered. by our Security Operations Center. You can also email security@soundtransit.org. But I do want to make it really known that if there's an emergency, we always ask that 911 is called. Security can be notified later, but we don't want to delay or hinder, the response from our emergency responders, whether it be fire, medical, or police. I just wanted to briefly touch on see something, say something, which I'm sure if you've been out in our system and rode our system, you'll see that plastered throughout our trains and at our stations. But this is just our way of trying to not provide any kind of barriers and just make it to where, hey, if something is going on, please let us know. And if it's nothing, that's fantastic. But we'd rather look at it and make sure that it's not an issue. Obviously, there's some advice up there for see something, say something. You guys can all see my screen, and I'll let you go through that. There's also a link at the bottom of this presentation, and I can send this presentation over to you all when we're all done if you would like it. What I did want to point out, and this will come up a little bit later on when we start talking about parking garages and other things, is Sound Transit has emergency call boxes throughout our system. We have 2 different call boxes located at our system or at our stations. The ones on the platform, those are the middle photograph there of the yellow call box. Those go to our link control center. So you won't get the SOC if you press those. They'll go to Link Control Center, and then Link Control Center will communicate with SOC if there's a security-related issue or concern. And then we also have boxes that look exactly like that in our parking garages as well. The parking garages go directly to our SOC, Security Operations Center. So there's just 2 differences there that I wanted to make sure that I pointed out in reference to the emergency call boxes. And then obviously, if you're riding any of our Link Light Rail vehicles on the 1 line or the 2 line or down in Tacoma, we have emergency call buttons on all of our LRVs, and those go straight to the operator. And the operator then communicates with the LCC, which then can communicate with the SOC. So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to operating the railroad and the train system from a security standpoint, and also obviously from a scheduling standpoint. But all of these are monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or when in use by when the train's in use and moving.
And just one little quick anecdote that I'll add to this is, as far as the 206 number goes, I've used that while I use the service, and I've tested that out just to kind of audit ourselves on what we're doing. And what I've seen is when you use that number to text and say, hey, there's something going on that I'm not sure about, at the next stop, it's typically security is ready to go. I mean, they're really good at this, and that number really works for people that aren't sure about something. So I encourage everyone, when you're riding, put that number in your phone and have it just in case. It's if you're concerned about security, it's just one extra thing to make it so that you can reach out without having to pick up the phone and call or anything. And it's worked really well for me.
Yeah, and I'll actually add further to that too. It is one of the things I mentioned, the absorbent amount of cameras that we have within our system that we can monitor. If you call and provide a location of where you're at, we can immediately locate a camera angle that might be able to view that area to then have that be monitored to be able to provide real up-to-date information to our security as well as we're dispatching them to that location. So before I talk about our contracted security officers, we have a group that recently started. It's been implemented for almost 2 years now. I would say about 1.5 years, they've really been active and in the field. It's a brand new group, so it started from the ground up, but it's our field activity specialists. And this group, they're not security officers, but they are equipped much like a security officer. They respond to different issues throughout the system where we would need a Sound Transit employee or Sound Transit security, public safety personnel on the ground and immediately. So they're a 24/7 team that really are kind of the backbone of what I use, or what we do on the backside of my team that has, four persons and a manager to be able to administer these contracts and manage all of these security officers that we have. These are kind of our boots on the ground folks that are able to go out there and provide an oversight, and also provide information back to us in case there was and is a serious incident on our system. So they focus mainly on the link light rail system. They are mobile, they drive vehicles, they do ride the trains, but they have vehicles to be able to get around to different locations quickly, if need be, to go ahead and assist security officers in a major situation. But they also do focus, or they also do spend some time on the sounder trains as well, and throughout our different facilities that we have. The photograph of them here is just to show what kind of uniforms that they wear. The tan khaki pants with the navy blue polo shirt, for the most part, or you'll see them in a big bright green jacket that says Sound Transit Public Safety on the back. And this group has been really instrumental in being able to provide information to different groups within public safety, especially during any kind of major event that occurs, or service disruptions that we may have, et cetera. And they're able to provide eyes and ears, and then be able to get that information back directly to us, rather than having to go through the contractor to get their information from them. So now our contract security services. This is what I'm sure that most of you all, if ride the link light rail or the sounder train, have seen out there. I point out that we have currently 4 different security contractors that work for the Sound Transit account. We are a very large, expansive system, as you all probably know, and ranging over now 3 counties. It was 2, now 3, and so just for light rail, and then our Tacoma link, which ultimately will eventually connect to the one line sometime in the future. But I wanted to, all of the security contractors that we have with Intercon Security Services, Allied Universal, Pal American, and Phoenix, they all provide security at different locations. Rarely are they at the same location. They may be at a location together if we have a special event planned and we needed to bring in additional security staff. They all wear the same uniforms, with the exception of some of the color on the top of their shirts and jackets, and I'll share that on the next slide as we move forward. But the big differentiating factor with all of them is they all wear their own patches. So we do not have a Sound Transit only patch. They wear their patches to identify which company that they work for. We do this for a multitude of reasons. Very briefly, I'll go down the list here. Intercon Security Services, they focus their security footprint is mainly the 1-line and the 2-line station security. So they're the officers that you would see at at Northgate or Roosevelt or UW. You would see them. They focus on the original 1-line. I'll call it the original 1-line, since we just expanded to Linwood Link. That is their main focus. They focus the University of Washington, U District, Roosevelt, and Northgate. All is the responsibility of Intercon security at the stations. Allied Universal is our Transit Safety Officer group. For short, we call them TSOs. We really like acronyms at Sound Transit. We use lots of acronyms for all of our units, but our transit security officers focus on onboard security. You might have seen them in the bright green uniform, and I'll show you a photograph of what their uniforms look like as on the next slide. But they focus mainly on link light rail 1-line and 2-line. They also do provide security services to our T line down in Tacoma, and they also ride the sounder trains. So they're our onboard security. They're not responsible for any particular station. they're responsible for the onboard security to make sure that when the trains are moving throughout our system, we have a security presence and the trains are as safe as we can possibly make them. Pal American Security works at our facilities. Some of you might have seen off of I-5 on the right-hand side. If you're going southbound, there's our big operation and maintenance facility. It's got these really big green and white dowels that go up into the air, and it's if you don't know what you're looking for, you're kind of confused at the end of the day of what that place actually is, but it's where we store all of our trains. So they focus a lot on facilities security, but they've also, of note to this group especially, they have been awarded the Linwood Link extension. So they provide station security at Shoreline South, Shoreline North, Mountain Lake Terrace, and Linwood stations at this point. So as we continue to grow, we have to continually try to evaluate, who's going to be the best suited for these new locations and these new stations as we continue to open them, simply because we are so big and we want to make sure that we're not providing one security contractor with too much work and they're not able to handle it, etc. And then Phoenix Protective is our mobile patrols. So I'm gonna actually switch the slide here just so you guys can all see so there are mobile patrols. They wear the blue uniform, which is that upper right-hand photograph. They also drive vehicles similar to the vehicle on the lower left photograph. We do have different makes and models of vehicles, but they're all of our mobile patrols are marked similar to what you see in that photo. Phoenix also is our contracted staff that monitor, dispatch, and call take in the SOC, in the Security Operations Center. So as I was talking earlier, the TSOs are our onboard train security. Allied are the bright green, lime green colored uniforms. And then our station security, whether it be Pal American Security Services or Intercon Security Services, wear the dark green top uniform. So like I said, all of Sound Transit security officers, they carry the same equipment. They carry the same radios to be able to communicate with the SOC, and they wear the same uniforms other than the color and their shoulder patches, so we can identify which company that they work for. The one offshoot of our mobile patrol, with Phoenix being our main mobile patrol carrier, is Pal American was also awarded mobile patrol in the north. So they, like I said, very similar vehicle markings, except for the Phoenix patrol marking on the very back of that Honda Passport, I believe that's in that picture, would be just a Pal American security logo. And the North Patrol is from Northgate all the way up to Everett Sounder Station. So there's two mobile patrols that patrol that area, those areas 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to include park and rides that Sound Transit has control over, to sounder stations, to areas that we've deemed as needing to be checked, or call them hot spots along the right of way or along the alignment. With our contract security team, we have approximately 350 plus security officers that work on the Sound Transit security contract. At any given time, do not quote me on this, do not hold me to this, but we have approximately 100 security officers that work the line on any given day, or work the system on any given day at one time. We do, in order to address problems or areas where our security operations, Sound Transit security operations team has deemed problems, we've created a couple emphasis teams throughout this as well. So we have a special emphasis team that is we have three separate teams of 2 security officers. That is our onboard trained security, where we can deploy them at the direction of myself and my team to locations where, we've had problems or issues, mainly just areas where we think that based on data that we've gotten, that, you know, it can utilize a little bit more security at these locations, to try to, you know, address any issues that may be, you know, coming through. The other thing that we've just recently established is the mobile emphasis team. So they're in vehicles. There's 2 mobile patrols, and when these teams aren't on a directed patrol that's directed by Sound Transit Security Operations, they are to focus on the link light rail station entrances. So the one line station entrances, where they would go and they patrol the outside of the station at the entrances, and then they drive to the next station, do the same thing. This team has also been really instrumental for us when we have, you know, sold out Mariner games, and Stadium Station down in downtown Seattle gets jam packed after the Mariner game lets out. We're able to deploy this team in vehicles, and they're able to go down and help with traffic control and help make sure that that platform is safe. So Sound Transit Law Enforcement is a separate entity than our security officers. So we have law enforcement and we have security. I would say that security is what you primarily see, since they are posted at most of our light rail stations throughout the one line and on the 2 line. But for our law enforcement, we contract with King County Sheriff's Office, Sound Transit Division. We call them Sound Transit STPD. And I just want to make note that the STPD provides a lot of services to us, and KCSO provides a lot of services to us, but they are generally not the primary agency of jurisdiction. Most, if not all of our stations, whether it be one line, whether it be the Sounder train, whether it be the 2 line over on the east side, are within a municipal jurisdiction. So most of these facilities located in the incorporated cities, STPD may respond. Usually, the jurisdiction of which the facility is located in is probably going to have the quicker response for emergency type situations, just because they're there in that localized area, where STPD can be spread out anywhere within our entire transit system. So these cities could take lead on response, reporting, and investigation. And then as a result of that, law enforcement response to these stations, you'd see our security, obviously, and then from there you could see King County Sheriff's Office, Sound Transit Division, or a city police department, or both of them may show up. And as far as jurisdictional issues and things like that are concerned, I know, you know, SPD's here as well, and it's handled between King County Sheriff's Office and the agency that where the facility resides, on who will handle the issue or the problem or the call for service that needs to be handled. Some things that King County Sheriff's Office provides to Sound Transit is patrol operations. They have an explosive canine unit, which I believe is up to 4 bomb dogs at this time that we utilize on the one line, that we utilize on Sounder, and that we utilize on the 2 line. We just recently launched a bike team for KCSO that is 6 deputies and a sergeant. And they have been really instrumental on addressing problem areas especially along the one line and in the Seattle region. I know that they've worked closely with SPD in certain locations, and really been just instrumental. What they do is they'll ride their bikes through the station, and then they'll get on a train, they'll go to the next station, ride around the station when they're not on some form of directed patrol or some sort of emphasis patrol. And then we have our joint transit anti-terrorism team, our JTAT detectives, and they're a cross section between King County Metro and Sound Transit. So they're a group that works with both King County Metro and us, but they provide a lot of information when it comes to, I'll use the MLB All-Star game as an example. We got a lot of other things coming up with FIFA and World Cup and different things like that coming to Seattle, but they really provide a lot of intel for us as a security operations group to be able to upstaff security when it becomes necessary, determine how we're going to deploy our security resources that we have, et cetera. So they work on both Metro and Sound Transit side and provide mainly intel. But it's a group of detectives that do that. We also have a criminal investigation division, who most people know as detectives. They'll investigate crimes that happen on Sound Transit property, along whether it be the one line, whether it be the sounder train. But they investigate any high level crimes that require additional investigation that maybe hasn't been taken over by a city or a municipal jurisdiction that took primary on that location or on that incident. And then the last thing that they provide to us is we have transit resource officers. This is a group of 3 that really focus on kind of being the liaisons between security operations and STPD when it comes to problem locations and locations where we may need a little bit more attention. And what they'll do is they'll interface between our team and patrol. They'll interface between our team and the bike team to try to make sure that we're addressing issues as they arise and before they become bigger problems or bigger issues. Just some photographs of Sound Transit law enforcement out working. The mark, I just thought this was important to see that the markings of our STPD vehicles, they're basically the same as the King County Sheriff's Office vehicles, other than the blue stripe down at the bottom that says Sound Transit. You'll also see vehicles that are marked the exact same way with a yellow stripe, and the yellow stripe is for King County Metro, who is also contracts with the King County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services. So that's how we differentiate between, a regular King County Sheriff's Office deputy and somebody who is assigned to the Sound Transit Police Department or Sound Transit Division of the King County Sheriff's Office. Again, some just important phone numbers at the bottom of the screen. In the middle there's the customer service non-emergency line for Sound Transit Police, and then also the real non-emergency line for dispatch to get a uniform patrol response if you're dealing with something that is not an emergency where 911 is required, but still needs to be reported to law enforcement. I'll also add too that if anybody can contact any security officer as well at a station, and they can coordinate contacting law enforcement for something that needs to be reported as well. So there's multiple options that we have available to the public to make sure that we can get law enforcement and or medical called for any kind of incidents that might be occurring. So just some trends. I apologize because this is not going to be, I'm not going to really be able to provide you with solid numbers. And the reason for this, much like I explained earlier on, is that we're about a month behind. We've been open with Linwood Link for about a little over 2 months now. We should be getting some October numbers here shortly, but at any rate, ridership is obviously up. I know that's I'm sure you guys have seen the news reporting on parking garages being full. Trains have been coming into locations a lot fuller than we have seen in the past. So ridership is up. It goes without saying, the three of the new stations that we opened have parking garages. And so obviously just in and of itself, I know the buses have been, bus routes from up north into Seattle have been cut, and they've pushed people to ride the light rail into Seattle. So ridership is up, and I would say that we saw about a 10% increase in ridership in 1 month. But again, without having a few months of data, it's really hard to say what that actually looks like. There's a link on here to our public facing ridership data. I encourage you all to take a look at that. It's really interesting. We move a lot of people. we move a lot of people. So and it's great. It's awesome. And then for our security responses, our top 4 security responses that we respond to, and this is pretty much system wide, and this is also pretty much monthly. These 4 categories are the top of our list. Welfare checks being the highest, medical assist being closely thereafter, trespasses and disturbances. I will just add that with disturbances, those can range anywhere, and we do have some. It is broken down a little bit more granular, but I don't want to bore everybody with all of that. The disturbances could range from, physical assaults to just yelling and screaming. So those are just kind of overall what we see on a monthly basis. And I will say that in the 2 years that I've been here, and looking back at the data before coming and presenting to you all today, that these 4 categories of our security responses are what we see basically monthly at the station locations.
Chris, it's Katie. I'm just going to interject that we only have a few minutes left, and I'm hoping we can also get a few questions in.
I am almost done.
Good.
So parking garages, they are patrolled by our mobile patrol. They have primary responsibility for all of ST-owned parking garages. Like I said, there's 3,184 cameras throughout the system that are monitored. And then there's the emergency call boxes that are situated within the garages. Security from the station, if a parking garage is attached to it, will respond to incidents and calls for service, but their primary function is not to patrol the garage. That's done by our mobile patrol. And then we have a division within Sound Transit called the Transportation Safety and Security Division that utilizes CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design, to try to maximize safety around those parking garages. I know that this was one thing that I had talked to Katie about prior to security for buses. So as Sound Transit continues to grow and we continue to add bus bays to our stations, security on the buses is provided by the agency in charge of the bus. So for instance, King County Metros is in charge of their security on their buses. Community Transit, the same thing. Sound Transit Mobile Patrol provides bus bay patrolling, and they respond, and then the station security will respond when necessary. We currently have a working group that we meet with King County Metro, Community Transit, and Pierce Transit in order to try to coordinate our security responses so they're all kind of similar and the same. That's all I got. There you go, Katie.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and dive into some of the questions that have been submitted in the chat. I don't know if we'll have time for hands raised, so I encourage anybody with their hand raised to put it in the chat, just in case, because I'm going to scroll through those first as they've been coming in. First question, are the security contractors authorized to arrest or intervene if they witness assault or other criminal activity, or do they monitor and contact 911 for sworn officers?
So security does not have the ability to make an arrest. They're not sworn. They do have the ability to detain, and we have a use of force policy for them that they can utilize force to protect themselves, to protect an innocent bystander, to assist law enforcement, and to prevent somebody from injuring themselves.
Okay. Do the contract security carry any weapons at all?
They do. They carry a baton, and then I wouldn't consider handcuffs weapons, but they carry handcuffs and a baton, and then a radio.
Okay. What kind of background and training do the security workers have?
That's a great question. So backgrounds vary. I can't really speak to that portion of it. Backgrounds vary from customer service to former law enforcement to former military. And then as far as the training is concerned, the contracted company provides the training, and it within our contracts, there is very specific language of what they have to cover in that training. And so an example is approximately 40 to 80 hours of training prior to being out in the system and actually providing security services.
And that training is consistent across all of those different security agencies?
Yes, it is. It is as consistent as we can make it when we have 4 different security contractors that work. Sound Transit specific training is consistent, yes.
Okay.
And I think it's worth pointing out that we moved to having 4 vendors in this way. It was the last 2 years, right? So that we
Yeah.
had more control over the specific needs for the security needs that we need throughout the station.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. What kind of crime data does Sound Transit collect and report on, and is it publicly available? Or is it attached to the law enforcement agency that responded, or what?
Yeah, so that's a good question too. I believe the crime data would be attached to Sound Transit PD, and then also the local jurisdiction that would respond to those locations.
Is it publicly available on your website?
It is not public, to my knowledge, it is not publicly available on the Sound Transit website. It may be on the King County Sheriff's Office website, or if you're looking at a specific station, that jurisdiction's crime reporting data.
Is that one of the things you could follow up on and let us know?
Yeah,
Yep.
what I'll suggest too is we just recently brought to the board that like the year in review from security and safety, which kind of goes into the high level of a lot of this stuff, and that's publicly available, so I can make sure we share that as well.
Okay, great. How has Sound Transit been addressing the issues that have been in the news recently about drugs being used, and particularly smoking of things like fentanyl on the trains?
Sure. So we have expanded our security program to almost double what it used to be. And we have added the TSOs to be on board trains. We're also working with Sound Transit operations on different statistics when it comes to which trains we can place these set teams that I spoke about earlier, the special emphasis teams, on which trains we can maybe target to make sure that we're trying to address those issues. And so working basically just with data to try to make sure that we can address them as best as we can with the resources that we have. I'll also add to that we have increased our onboard security by an additional 10%, which I know doesn't sound, 10%, that seems like a small number, but the goal and what we have met is that there is onboard train security on 30% of our one-line trains. That is our goal.
Okay. 2 related questions from one person. Do you prevent public drug use, and do you protect the riding public from verbal and physical abuse?
That is the goal. That the goal. I mean, public drug use in our system. Now, I just want to caveat all of this with our security officers have jurisdiction. I'll call it jurisdiction within our on Sound Transit property. Once it's off property, it really then is in the hands of law enforcement and in that jurisdiction or STPD. But yes, we do. We have a no tolerance policy for drugs, and security should be addressing those issues. And same with verbal and physical abuse. They have the ability to remove folks from the trains for violating ST's policy, and then the kind of the catch-all for that is unlawful transit conduct, which in Washington is a misdemeanor crime.
Okay, this is a longest question, but let me get through this. I noticed there was no topic for bicycle safety. I would like to know if Sound Transit is considering bike valet in a similar way to how Vancouver, BC, with their free bike valet at some SkyTrain stations, and the San Francisco Bay Area bike stations at some BART stations. They provide free, secure bike valet and storage. Considering the recent Seattle Times article about how quickly the Linwood Station's 1,900 free parking spaces fill up, there are only a handful of secure bike lockers and an unmanned bike room. It's frustrating when you show up at a link station on a bike and there aren't any lockers available.
I'm gonna let
Yeah,
Eric
I
answer
mean, and
that
I'm
question.
trying. I'm wrapping my head around that one because it's a great question, but it's detailed, and I think just in sake of time, maybe if Carlo, if we can connect offline, I'd be happy to get you more information on it. As far as what we've put into Linwood, I mean, we do have bike lockers at I think all of the stations. Now, granted, with the 1900 station parking slots that we have at Linwood, I don't know how you match that with bike capacity in terms of the lockers. But what I could do is get back to you with the numbers that we were monitoring in terms of how people are using the bike lockers, because they are affordable. They're like, I think 6 cents an hour. So the idea there is if you ride your bike, you should be able to put it in a locker there, but clearly there will be a point where that's being fully utilized, and maybe that's already happened from the sound of your comment. So let's connect offline. I'm sure Katie can help us.
And since that's a big issue in Seattle generally, no, somebody else just said ditto for bike storage and safety. Do you know how many bike lockers there are per
I have
garage?
the number, but I don't have it off the top of my head because that was one of those things that was like the last thing that we installed on Linwood Link as we did that. And so, but I do know that Linwood Link has, I think, a good number of them throughout. I can't speak to the rest of the system off the top of my head.
Maybe we could have you call that out specifically. So if there are bike riders in our group that want to follow up, they have either a contact name or a website they can go to register, their concerns and their support for bike services. Okay, guys, we went a little over, but not too much. I want to thank you both very much for your time tonight. I think we had a good conversation, and we really appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully those numbers will stay up as we just continue to expand the system. And I suspect we'll be circling back to you to talk some more. So thank you again for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. I'm going to remove your spotlights.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
There we go. Thank you very much.
What I'll do is I'll get the PDF version of this deck so you can send that out to the group, and then follow
That's
up with
great.
a few of these and see if I missed anything in chat before I hop off as well.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
And then Katie, real quick, I added my email address in there. If there's any generalized security questions, please feel free to reach out, and I'll try to answer them as best I can for
Great.
you all.
And so folks, if you look in the chat, there's a link that Eric's provided, and then the contact information for Chris. And then just another one final positive comment for you guys. Sasha says bikers will increase. All my friends are arranging their lives around it. And thank you for your work. So that's very positive. Okay. So next up, we have Megan Westfall. Let me find you on my screen. Hello, Megan.
Hi.
And I just made you a co-host in case you want to share anything. Let me spotlight.
I do not have any slides, no.
That's all right, but you're big as life in the middle of the screen. There you are.
All
Go
right,
for it.
perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Megan Westfall with the City Attorney's Office, working out of SPD's North Precinct, as you know. I just want to talk about a few things tonight. So first off, we just wrapped up the month of October, which is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And domestic violence is, unfortunately an issue that we as prosecutors see far too much of and are constantly working to address those issues. And my office has a dedicated unit that does address domestic violence referrals from the Seattle Police Department. And, when most people think of domestic violence, they think of violence between intimate partners. And while that really does form, I would say, the majority of our referrals from SPD, domestic violence can also include child abuse, which we see referrals, unfortunately, in that arena, violence between other certain related individuals, and also violence between roommates, which we see from time to time. And so our domestic violence unit has 9 full-time attorneys. They review all of the cases that are sent to us. They file the cases, negotiate plea agreements, and take these cases to trial. It can be really difficult work. I worked in the unit for 3 years, and I can attest to how difficult and draining the work can be. We have a really experienced supervisor, which is amazing. And we actually have one attorney who is dedicated full-time to firearms cases. So any domestic violence case where a firearm is present. And this attorney works to make sure these firearms have been properly seized by SPD and properly forfeited by the suspect. And we know that access to firearms exponentially increases the likelihood of a domestic violence related homicide. So it's very important that we get these firearms out of these suspects' hands. And this prosecutor works really closely with SPD and also really closely with the King County Prosecutor's Office, as there's a regional team that does this body of work. And it's really been highly successful in making sure we're securing firearms from these pretty dangerous people. The second body of work I wanted to talk about that my office is really involved in is our impaired driving prosecution. So we are actually really lucky here in the city of Seattle because we've received grant funding from a group called the Traffic Safety Prosecutor Resource Group. It's a nationwide group. And this program, like I said, it's national, and most large cities and most large counties have at least one prosecutor that serves in this capacity. And this prosecutor not only assists with, impaired driving cases in my office by filing in them and negotiating them and trying them, but he also serves as a resource statewide and countywide and whatnot for law enforcement and other prosecutors. And he works really closely with SPD's training unit to make sure that our officers are trained up in the best practices for detecting and investigating impaired driving cases. We faced a lot of challenges over the years with our impaired driving cases, but we've really made some impressive strides in how we deal with them. One challenge that we faced was the uptick in the need for officers to apply for a search warrant for a blood sample in impaired driving cases. Years ago, when alcohol was really the primary drug we were seeing in these cases, it would suffice for an officer to have the suspect submit to a breath sample in the precinct. However, we're really seeing an uptick in drug impaired driving, other than alcohol, obviously. And in those cases, we do require a blood sample to be able to prove that what drug is in the person's system. And so we really had to have officers start to pivot from getting a breath sample at the precinct to applying for a search warrant and securing a blood sample so that we had that evidence for trial. So my office worked really closely with SPD. We trained officers on this body of work, and we really streamlined the process to make it so you could apply for a warrant in a timely fashion and make it so they could do it all electronically as well. We also made it so there was a judge that was on call 24/7 that could, answer an officer's request. As we know, a lot of these impaired driving cases are happening at, 2, 3 in the morning and court isn't in session. So it's really been really successful, and it's helped overcome one of those challenges. Another challenge that we face with impaired driving cases was having to transport the suspect then to a hospital in order for a nurse to perform the actual blood draw where we got the search warrant for it. Oftentimes there were long waits at hospitals. There's a lot of other cases that take priority over, a blood draw, and that can lead to the dissipation of the evidence in the blood. We also had issues when these cases would go forward to trial with being able to locate the person who did the blood draw. Oftentimes the nurses, they have moved to different hospitals. Sometimes they've even moved out of state. And that really provided an evidentiary issue in our cases. And so we, again, partnered with SPD, and we brought SPD a model that's been used in other states. So as you might know, many of our officers are already trained as EMTs or have other sort of medical backgrounds, which make them qualified to perform a blood draw. So we worked on a program with SPD where certain officers have been designated as officers that have been properly trained and meet the requirements of the statute to be able to perform the blood draw in lieu of having to go to a hospital and having to have a nurse perform it. So it really cut out the need to have to travel to a hospital, wait for that, and also cut out the need to then later track down that witness for trial. So it's a relatively new thing that SPD is doing, but so far it's been pretty successful in really working through those challenges. And then just finally, in the impaired driving realm as well, as we near the holidays, I think it's pretty common knowledge that we tend to see an uptick in more impaired drivers on our streets. And with that in mind, my office and our traffic safety resource prosecutor and of course SPD are all partnering to have several emphasis patrols during this time of year, with the focus being on detecting, investigating, and prosecuting impaired driving. And so I know there's one coming up this following weekend, and we'll see more throughout the next month and a half or so. And this is very, very important work, right? And we're hopeful that these emphasis patrols will be really effective in keeping impaired drivers off the street and really minimizing the harm that they could potentially cause. And that's all I had to update the group on tonight. Does anyone have any questions? I can check the chat real quick.
I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay.
That was a nice overview. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any real quick raise of hands?
Henry, I thought there was a state law with rent. So, Henry, there are requirements in the RCW and the WAC of who is qualified to draw blood. And the SPD officers that are doing this body of work are qualified to do it.
Great. Thank you very much, Megan. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we will see you next month. Let me remove your spotlight and see if I can find Casey. There he is. Casey, do you have any slides tonight or just?
No slides, but lots for the chat. And
Okay,
I'll
that's
just
great.
copy and paste it in there. One note to follow up on what Megan was saying, and a similar note to what's in the comments is when you see folks asking for budget requests for the increase in traffic related cases, we're seeing the same things on roads that are covered by the county prosecutor's office too. So we have the cases that are on I-5, I-90, the state route 99. State roads come to the county prosecutor's office. Seattle roads go to Seattle. That across Washington state, we've seen an increase, and it's a real concern in vehicular homicides and vehicular assaults. And impaired driving is a big emphasis for us. I actually just before this was looking at a budget form that we're going to send to the county council saying, here are the increase in numbers that we're seeing statewide. It's not just a King County issue, and why it's so important to fund that. Also, on the funding note, that the chat reminded me, vehicular homicide and assault blood draws jumped the queue for testing with the state patrol crime lab, but regular DUI cases can take several months to come back. So if you don't see a DUI case with a charging decision right away, that can often be the holdup. And that's not a knock on the state patrol at all. It's just a funding issue. And so that's why when you see those requests, why they're so important, because we don't want somebody who's a notorious drunk driver on the road for months when they could be in court. And, and oftentimes that leads to accountability, not only, to be safer on the roads, but also have people address their issues. But some other notes, one of the things that I'll add here in the chat, we just finished our October gun report, and that what we've asked deputy prosecutors to do in our office is anytime they have a case that they charge that involves a gun, to flag that in our system. And there were 26 cases specifically that were filed out of Seattle in just the month of October. And if you look at the last 3 months, there were 17 the previous month, 16 the month before that. So 59 cases overall. And most of those involve unlawful gun possession, but they were also, overall for those 59 cases, there were 285 charges. And that's just out of Seattle involving gun cases. And that's a huge number. And maybe a handful of these, maybe 5 or 6 made the news. Most of them didn't. But it's important to put this report together, and I'll share it in the comments once I'm done talking here. But it's important to know that those cases are being charged, because a lot of times when they're not on the news, people wonder if they actually are being charged, but they are. There was 125 of those charges were unlawful gun possession or similar charges like that. 45 were assault charges. There was 23 robberies. There were 3 murders and 1 attempted murder charge. There were 5 drive-by shootings out of Seattle that were 5 charges for drive-by shootings, 3 rape charges that involved guns. Also, promoting prostitution, which is a big issue on Aurora. Lots of domestic violence cases, felony harassment, DUIs, arson. I mean, all kinds of cases. You'll see it here in the chat here shortly. And that sounds like a huge number. And we just got wrapped up the 100 days of action to prevent gun violence. But that emphasis is not something new from King County prosecutors. It's just the report is new, but we've been doing that all along. And so hopefully it's reassuring for folks to know that those cases are consistently being filed every day. And Megan's on the phone with our office all the time, and vice versa. We just were on an officer case this morning. And it's really helpful to have that relationship. And hopefully when you see that report, it'll be reassuring for folks. Also, on the transit note, I heard from a business owner the other day, something that is correct, and I think it's also understood by King County prosecutors, that you can have the safest or you can have the best transit system around, but if people don't feel safe on it, it doesn't do you any good. And we understand that for sure. And it doesn't matter where a felony crime is committed, whether it's on a bus or on a Sound Transit train or on the streets or in an encampment, wherever it is, anywhere from Medina to, in encampment, it's going to be handled the same way and reviewed the same way. And we know that people want and need to feel safe. And that can be anywhere from physical violence to even graffiti. I just actually saw somebody on a bus the other day that was tagging the bus seat right next to me. And it's like, what are you doing? And so we called that in, and, and I think we'll have much more on those cases generally coming up. Hopefully that's helpful. If folks have questions, let me take a look in the chat. And I think I've kept it to 5 minutes, hopefully. I think you're on mute, Katie.
Katie, you're muted. You're muted, Katie.
I don't understand why you people can't hear me. Okay, Leon, go ahead and ask your question. Unmute yourself. Thanks, Nancy.
Okay, so this is for you or Megan. I'm kind of slow on this stuff. I didn't figure out how to raise my hand until just now. I was under the impression that the city attorney deals only with misdemeanors, but is domestic violence a felony or a misdemeanor?
It really varies by what happened. Yeah, it varies by the circumstances of each case. It can be either. If there's a broken bone, if there's a credible threat to kill that comes to us. Megan, what kinds of cases fall in?
Yeah, so you're correct. We handle all the misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors, and those can be domestic violence in nature. Also, the county then handles anything that's a felony. So threats to kill, so that's felony harassment, that would go to the county. Any assault that results in like serious bodily injury, that would be a felony level assault, obviously, like a homicide, a rape, something like that. Another one, if there are multiple order violations, so there's a no contact order in place. The third one, order violation conviction, becomes a felony. So there's some overlap there, but kind of think of it as like the smaller crimes, if you will, come to my office. The more serious ones go to Casey's office.
And a similar note on that around the transit safety issues. If you have an assault on a train, that can come to either office, depending on the severity of it. If there's a broken bone, it comes to us. If there's not, often those are misdemeanors. If you have somebody who's smoking fentanyl under state law, that's a gross misdemeanor, goes to the city. Actually, I think would come to us if it's transit. So if it's at a transit station, that would go to the city. If it's on the platform, if it's on the train, that would come to us. If you're dealing, that goes to us too.
It sounds like however it gets filed, you basically can get a case number and somebody can track it from there. They don't have to worry about who's specifically filing.
Yep. Yeah, that incident number is really helpful from SPD. And also, if we have, say, for example, there's a felony attached to other misdemeanor cases. So if you have what would be a misdemeanor domestic violence call, but the person unlawfully has a gun, and that is charged as a felony under the law. And we also have misdemeanor domestic violence allegations with that too. The King County prosecutor would take all of those under the same case, so it's not two cases in two different jurisdictions.
Now we're eating a bit into the captain's time. Thank you, Captain Agard. But there is one, you mentioned domestic abuse cases from North Aurora. Who do those generally involve? Wondering if the loitering law is helping. We'll save the question about whether it's helping for the captain. But who is generally involved in the North Aurora ones? The city or the prosecuting attorney's office? Still, I think that's on the severity.
Yeah, it does. The promoting prostitution cases are felonies. Those come to us. The types of domestic violence allegations determine which ones, which office it comes to.
Okay. And you got a kudos. Someone says appreciate the collaborative effort to increase safety for the non-criminal population. So
Yeah, thanks, Larry.
thank you both very much. And as always, just a reminder to folks, Casey's put a ton of links and information into the chat. The chat is saved along with the recording. So when we send out the recording, you can access everything that's in the chat, everyone. So just so you know, it's available. So thank you both. And now I am going to find, there she is, Captain Agard. Hello, thank you for your patience as we work through a lot of good questions tonight. And you are on.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everybody. First, I'll give some of the North Precinct crime data, and then I have several updates from the precinct. So looking at overall crime data, just for North Precinct, if you combine property and violent crime, it's down 2% for the year, 7% for the last 28 days. Looking at violent crime, year to date, it's up 5%. Some of the numbers that are increasing that are the numbers from aggravated assaults, robbery, and rape. And those aren't up substantially either. Up a little bit in those categories, pushing it up to 5%. Last 28 days, all the crime categories for violent crime are down except for assault. So overall, in the last 28 days, it's down 15%. So it's trending down, which we usually see in the fall when the bad weather gets here. Property crime year to date's down 2%, with reductions in all categories except arson. Motor vehicle theft is still trending down, which is really good news because that pushes other crime down because they're not stealing vehicles and using these stolen vehicles in other crimes as much. That's really good to see. And that's citywide. Shots fired is up 3%, and that's trending about the same citywide. A few updates. You probably saw it in the news, we did have a homicide on November 3rd at 06:47 hours. North Precinct officers responded to a deceased male on the path in Mineral Springs Park. Reports said that the male was clearly deceased with significant trauma. So our homicide unit is currently investigating that. And you probably saw this on the news too. This was a big operation that our department did along with the feds. It was called Operation Smoke Ring. It was an operation that was ongoing. They did a lot of investigation, and they did a large bust over near the University of Washington there in the U District, pretty close to the campus. And I did send Katie some pictures, and if you haven't seen them, they're pretty good pictures of some of the guns and stuff, money that was recovered, and she'll attach those to the notes at the end. But just giving you an overview, the narcotics unit and along with the feds did 31 search warrants in different locations. Right now they have 15 indictments with more to come. They recovered 80 plus firearms. And these firearms are very good quality firearms. A lot of Glocks, which was switches, which we love to get off the street as well. Suppressors for the guns, thousands of rounds of ammunition, including armor piercing ammunition, body armor, 500,000 plus in cash, gold and high-end jewelry, 19 grams of fentanyl, kilograms of fentanyl, 20 kilograms of MDA, and 4 kilograms of cocaine. So it was just this huge drug and ammo bust with some indictments coming. So I thought that would be a good thing to talk about. And I know it was on the news too. Some other precinct updates I see here. Jane Dorr, my favorite CSO, is on the call or on our meeting tonight. We have made the transition, so the CSOs are now at the North Precinct. I currently have 3 CSOs and 1 sergeant. And they work out of the precinct there, and will be out in the community, North Precinct, a lot more than they were, because they report to me during the week unless there's a big citywide incident going on. And Jane will be, I believe, out there in January, permanently assigned. Is that right, Jane?
That's correct. January.
Yeah. Yeah, I told him I had to have you out there. That was my request.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Do you have any updates from that community service? How's it going being at the precincts?
Well, I'm currently assigned to East, but tomorrow I'll be up north. I'll be up north on a call. So I was just telling a community member that currently the North CSOs, all of us, we work 4/10s. So the North group works Sunday through Wednesday. So when they're gone on Thursday, I cover North if I get called there.
Oh, good. Oh, good. And they're going to be expanding the hours and hiring more as well.
Yeah,
for
at some point in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very cool. And thanks for being on the meeting, Jane.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Another update, we had license plate readers in the cars, and these are in all the patrol cars, or in some, we only had a couple, but we just activated this new system that reads any stolen car as they're driving past them or coming toward them. And we get a hit on it, and it alerts the officer that, hey, that's a stolen car. They're now activated in every patrol car. So we've been getting a lot of stolen hits. It's going to be a really good tool for recovering stolen cars. The problem is that they don't stop, right? Because they know we can't chase them. So we get behind them, try to pull them over, and they just leave, and we can't chase them. But if the car is associated like with with a violent crime or something, and we can know the driver probably had something to do with it, then we can chase them. But at least it's a tool, and if it's parked, and some people do pull over. Another big development is that during COVID, we had all these booking restrictions, so we couldn't book misdemeanors, and then never went back to it. So SPD, like if you had a shoplifter or any misdemeanor or trespasser that kept bugging people, we could never do anything with them. We could take them to the precinct, write a report, but we could never book them and kind of disengage them for the day to kind of protect the community and de-escalate situation. But now we do have an agreement. We can book misdemeanors back into King County, and we have 135 beds for that total. And I think today it was up to like 76. So we have plenty of room now for officers to book misdemeanors. Not all misdemeanors, but the ones that we really need to book. Our iTrue unit and our online reporting is now taking 36% of the calls so far this year. So that's really done well in allowing our officers to free up from some of the paper calls and respond to calls that are in progress. And their goal is to try to get that percentage up even more in the upcoming year. For Aurora, I know our vice unit did a recent op there targeting the Johns. Those are ongoing. They continue to do those. We still have our Nora 91 car. It's a 2-officer car, proactive car that just focuses on the Aurora corridor and does proactive work. So that's still going on. We're gearing up this whole week for, I know no one wants to talk about the election. I'm talking about that, but we're gearing up for any election civil disturbances going on in the city right now. Last night, we were activated to be downtown East Precinct to make sure that there wasn't any violence, and about 30 of the kind of like the black bloc showed up in their dark masks, and they start up at Cal Anderson, and they started blocking streets, throwing garbage cans, doing property damage, and SPD was able to go in after they made announcements and target just these individuals that were doing these property damage and throwing stuff around. They arrested, I believe, 5, and that really de-escalated the whole situation. So it went well last night. So far tonight, I haven't gotten any calls, so it must be going pretty good tonight, but we'll be activated through Sunday for any kind of election disturbance anywhere in the city. Let's see, I know Magnuson Park. I had the operation there all summer, more toward July and August. There's not an operation going on there right now, but I haven't had any recent complaints, so I'm assuming the bad weather has kind of put a stop to that. If someone lives in Magnuson Park, I think Leon, you do, right? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
I live up from there. On one evening after the meeting, the big meeting we had down there, I heard a little bit of noise, but I've heard nothing since.
Good, good. Yeah, I know the music really travels up to those homes up there.
Yeah.
So, and kind of like I said at the meeting with CM Rivera, and if anyone was at that meeting, you heard Parks agree with me and say they were going to partnership with me to get a plan in place before the good weather comes in the spring, to head that off, kind of like we did at Golden Garden. So that's my plan before the good weather hits and they return. Mike, there was a question that Katie sent me about our project officers. I have 2 project officers at North Precinct, one for the west side of the freeway, one for the east side of the freeway. They're super valuable to me. I know I've talked about this before, because any follow-up or ongoing issues in communities, they respond. And if they need to take a report or come to solutions to kind of handle the problem. And this is Officer Mike Cruzan. He does the west side of the freeway, but they go all over. And someone wanted just kind of an update from you on what you do.
Hi, everyone. Most of you probably recognize me. I've been here before. We've talked about this, but for someone new to the chat, we used to have a community police team. Each precinct did, and that comprised an entire squad of officers and a supervisor to deal with long-term issues that traditional policing really wasn't addressed or able to address effectively because of the 911 call loads and the demands on some of the different types of crimes. So we would have a dedicated group of officers that could spend time on these long-term projects, build relationships, come up with some non-traditional ways to address a problem. And that was, unfortunately, like many things in the precinct and the department, it's no longer a reality. It was entirely gone, but then Captain Agard identified the need to have somebody that can address some of these issues at the precinct level. But that comes at an expense as well, because that means there are fewer people working patrol. But the ability to have the problem-solving response, to spend more time on an issue that patrol officers aren't allowed to do or able to do, the relationships we have when we developed in the community police team, we can probably get to an outcome quicker than a patrol officer could. And we also have the time to devote to that. A lot of it's working with Megan directly on issues that overlap with the city attorney's office. Things like shutting down the Aurora motels. That involves a lot of legwork by from the legal side with Megan's expertise. And also, it's a police action. It's enacted by the police department. So we're involved directly. And I would be able to spend a lot of time on that with Megan, compiling data, police reporting, present those findings to the captain to make a determination if she should present it to the chief, for instance, and the chief would make the determination that these problem properties, like these motels, would constitute a chronic nuisance, and then basically shut the place down, pending their compliance with a plan that we would develop. And that takes a lot of time. And calling 911 repeatedly isn't going to fix that. So we have a dedicated group that also involves problem nuisance properties, like private properties, like vacant homes, apartment buildings, things like that again, officers are going to repeatedly. And coming up with a solution to eliminate the repeat 911 calls is important. So we can do with that. A lot of that involves other agencies. A lot of that involves just straight up police work as well. We'll go out and make the arrests. We'll do the reporting. We'll write the tickets if we need to. But it just allows the captain to determine a need and then send somebody out to take care of it and have somebody in place that might know the people that can get it done quickly, the other agencies that can work with the patrol officers to come up with a more effective solution than just calling 911 repeatedly, having a report done, making an arrest, moving on to the next call, only to return the next day to do another arrest versus finding an outcome so they don't have to keep going to that same address or to that same street. But some of these problems are big and they don't have an immediate solution. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these problems like Third and Pine downtown, some of the chronic problems on Aurora. If they had easy solutions, they wouldn't be problems. And so we have to think out of the box a little bit. Again, we are all hampered by the limited resources. I'm one person, and now I have my partner Terry Whalen. Have to mention that he's came on board the last couple months, and he's getting exposed to all the relationships and a lot of the problems that are coming up on our side of things. He's a long-term patrol officer in the precinct, so he's very familiar with what's going on. It's just learning sort of the way we do things kind of in the background that a lot of people don't even know exist, even in the precinct, and how we can get things done. So he's coming aboard that, but we liken the North Precinct to a large city of 300,000 residents, and it's frustrating for all of us, just like it is for the officers to have that inability to respond effectively a lot of times to people's calls for service. That's how it is with us when we get these complaints that we want to address. It's not like it used to be where each officer would have a neighborhood that they would be dedicated to. They could address it. They'd walk the beat more. It's a little more difficult to do. And basically, I work on the priorities determined by the captain and what needs to get done. And so that's how we go out and do our job every day, or if it's a week-long or month-long project. And it's pretty good though. And I'm always available for questions. My email it's always floating around. I think most people that are in regular contact with the precinct have my email. Katie's got it, so she can
Could you
put that
perhaps
in.
put it in the chat, Mike?
Yeah, I'll type it up.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of questions here that kind of relate to this, because I think there was that question about sort of what do you do? So one of the questions really was, how can the public bring a problem to the attention of the project officers? Is it okay to contact you directly, or do they go through the captain, or do they just call 911? And I mean, how does somebody escalate something to you, or is that even the role you want the public to play?
Well, I want to be as responsive as possible. It's a priority of the captain. It's a priority of the department. It's my personal priority. I don't like to say, sorry, we can't help you. I like to find a way to help you. But again, when it's one or two people for the whole precinct, and we're already tasked with certain priorities that demand a lot of time, the responsiveness might be limited and it can vary, but I want to hear about your problems, at least be able to maybe navigate some of the red tape in the city to get a better response to your complaint. It might not be necessarily a strong or a straight up police response. It might involve getting the parks department to fix some lighting, things like that, not traditional police crime enforcement. But we can still work with that because I know a lot of people. I can also deal with neighborhood groups, and we work with the crime prevention coordinator, CSOs, of course, we're all on the same team. And of course, my friends in patrol, we're always available. I can always tip them off to some things that they can focus on during the day as well. But yeah, I want to just temper people's expectations, just, as responsive as I want to be. If I get, a barrage of emails saying I got a noisy neighbor, I got a car with a muffler issue, I can't promise an immediate response or an ability to take care of that right away like we used to. It used to be a more effective way to do it, but it's really difficult right now. But yeah, reach out to me, let me know.
And this kind of, it also relates, it's kind of, your answer also flows into one of the other questions in here, which is kind of, you just brought up noise, and an example that somebody put in the chat is confusion about regarding the role of the CSOs versus yours. The person is asking, our neighborhood sought help with a noise disturbance from a live band. CSO attempted to knock on the door, no one responded. The person followed up, the citizen followed up and was told just to call 911. Can't CSOs approach a band in an instance like this to tell them they're disturbing the neighborhood? And so it's again, it's that kind of, what are the different roles and when should someone contact a CSO directly versus you?
Oh, well, can I chime in real quick, Katie?
Please.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was a good example. That was me. So, a community member
Troublemaker.
about a noise complaint of a band. And so I had a CSO, because I wasn't working in the north, go out there, but nobody answered the door. So that's a noise ordinance. CSOs don't, we don't enforce ordinances, we don't enforce laws. So I can go out and talk to that community member again tomorrow, or I can call them, but now they should call the non-emergency number or call 911 when, and I told that community member to, keep documentation of when it's going on, because you can look up the noise ordinance online. It's like 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. I think on Saturdays it goes to 11. But you need an officer to come out and actually take a report. But I will reach out. I will reach out tomorrow again with this community member and kind of go through the steps again. But if Mike wants to chime in about how officers handle noise complaints, feel free. But a report has to be written, and a CSO can't write that kind of report.
Yeah, well, one of the big problems for noise, I don't want to take too much time just going on this one specific issue, but like we have these residential noise ordinance laws that we can use for loud parties, like house parties in anywhere in the city or in neighborhoods. Essentially, it's basically for residential neighborhoods. If there's a loud party next door, people even just talking loud outside in their yards, if it's after 10 during the week or 11 o'clock on the weekend, that's actually a crime. It could be a crime. It could elevate to a crime and an enforcement action by the police. So you could call 911 for that. If you can't work with the neighborhood, maybe knocking on the door the next morning and say, hey, maybe it was a big birthday. It's going to be a once a year thing, but can you be mindful of the impact on the neighborhood? But otherwise you can call 911 for that. But again, on a busy Saturday night, response times are going to vary for something like that. And you have to be prepared for that.
And one of the things, in terms of, it isn't really just about this topic. What I want to emphasize is that this has been really helpful in talking about different roles and people trying, what I'm seeing from these different questions is that idea of who do I call? It sounds like there are specialized people like the CSOs, and that's great, but people are trying to figure out who do I call? And what I kind of hear, and I think I've heard from you all, when in doubt, just call 911 and at least record what that was that happened. And then make sure that, if you can reach out to a CSO or somebody after, that's great. But as a default, always call 911, right?
Yep.
Well, also, Katie, I put the CSO email address in the chat, and that supervisor looks at that 7 days a week. So for non-emergent issues, like, oh, I have a neighbor that's doing this, or I'm worried about this elder lady that lives on a boat. She has dementia. So as we're resource connectors. So anyway, I put it in the chat. If anybody has an issue they want to forward to the CSO team, there are 20 of us, and there's somebody on duty, at least, a couple of us every day.
Right. So
but
folks,
it is checked every day, but again, for non-emergent issues.
That's great. So folks, we ended up with a lot of time spent on questions, and the questions have proliferated as we have been talking with the captains. So, but we are just about at 8:30. I know I'm just quickly scrolling. Rudy, I see your hand, but I think these others were kind of in the queue way ahead. So I don't think we're going to get up to all these tonight. Captain, do you have a couple minutes, or should we do we need to end right on time for your schedule?
No, I have a couple minutes, and if we don't get to all the questions, let's if you could, or I can get them out of the chat, or
we will
answer next time.
Exactly. What we try to do, just for all the folks who are on, is we compile anything that's outstanding and send it ahead to the captain so she can follow up. So some of these are pretty darn long. You know what? I think as I look here, these are all going to get us into some pretty deep conversations, and we are really at 8:30. So I think I'm going to say we did a great job tonight. We will pull these questions. Rudy, if you would send us your question. I'm sorry we couldn't answer your hand raise. Thank you all for all of the information tonight. And Captain, I hope you got your main messages through. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think it went really well. Really good stuff tonight.
Yeah, a lot of good questions.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, we are working on the December meeting. We'll announce that soon. We hope you have a great Thanksgiving. It's kind of hard to believe that we're at that time of year, but let's hope for a peaceful Thanksgiving. We can all be grateful for many, many things. And we will see you all here next month for another meeting. And if the board members would stay on, that would be great. Thank you very much,
Great.
everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Thank you.